Most people buy their corals because of the coloration. But what happens if they start to turn and maybe not look as good as you thought? Well, today we're going to look at how to improve your coral coloration and maybe even improve the colors on the coral when you bought it. Coral coloration is one of the most talked about and important parts of the hobby, and it's also one of the least understood. This is because there are many factors involved in these complex chemical reactions that actually give corals their colors. While the common understanding is that zooxanthellae gives corals their color, it's a little bit more complicated than that. While much of the color is provided by zooxanthellae, the most vibrant colors are actually created by the coral themselves, and they come in the forms of two groups of proteins. The first of these proteins is chromoproteins, which are non-fluorescent. These are the duller colors that you see under whiter lighting. The second group of proteins are known as fluorescent proteins. These are the bright colors we see under blue light, such as cyan, yellow, orange, red, and green. These proteins are all produced by the coral and are oftentimes why bleached corals may appear more vibrant than a healthy coral. This is because the zooxanthellae, which creates most of the main coloration, is depleted because the coral is unhappy and has rejected those zooxanthellae, and so you're only able to see those bright fluorescent and chromoproteins. For our purposes, it's just going to be important to understand a few aspects of these proteins. Corals require amino acids to produce these proteins, so it's important to make sure they receive proper nutrition in order to produce them. While this nutrition may be able to be provided from fish poop and nutrients in the water like nitrates and phosphates, I've found that supplementing with direct feeding with either powdered foods or amino acid such as Reef Energy and AcroPower helps to produce more coloration. Additionally, these proteins only appear under certain spectrums. For instance, chromoproteins will only absorb whiter lights, and fluorescent proteins will only absorb bluer lighting, meaning that you need white lights to see the chromoproteins and blue lights to see those fluorescent proteins. Now that we understand what gives corals their colors, I want to dive into how to get the best coloration. This is going to involve a few different aspects, including nutrient levels, lighting, trace elements, and flow. I've found that keeping nitrates around 5 to 15 and phosphates around 0.15 to 0.05 provides sufficient nutrition to the corals to display their best coloration. I prefer to add nutrients through feeding like Reefroids and adding amino acids like Reef Energy. However, it's important that you don't over-elevate your nutrients because certain things like high phosphates can actually lead to browning out of the corals. As I said, chromoproteins and fluorescent proteins need certain lighting to appear. While you don't need to get top-of-the-line lighting, it is important that you're providing the corals with enough light. This can be double-checked with a par meter, or you can also just look at your corals and adjust your lighting based on how they look. For instance, if your corals are reaching up for the lights, you probably need to turn them up a little bit. And if your corals appear very shrunken and not fully opening, you may want to turn your lighting down. It may take some trial and error, but as long as you adjust your lighting slowly and don't add too much too fast, you can figure out what lighting brings out the best colors without a par meter. The next aspect of coral coloration is trace elements. This is one that has become much more informed recently with the introduction of ICP testing. This allows you to get lab-grade testing with minor elements that we weren't able to test for in the past. It's important to send out regular ICP tests if you do want to increase your trace elements through dosing, because some of them can be very harmful at high levels. Many are things like heavy metals that at low levels actually increase the vibrance of the colors. However, at higher levels will be toxic to not only your corals, but also your invertebrates. So maintaining regular ICP tests helps to ensure you're not overdosing these elements. This water change method is also a lot easier if you don't have high demanding corals such as acroporas that will tend to take up a lot of trace elements and require frequent replenishment. However, you do want to make sure that you're not pulling out too many nutrients with these water changes, because a lot of times when your nutrients again get too low, you'll run into more coloration issues. The final critical part of coral coloration we're going to talk about today is flow. Now, the reason that flow is important is because that flow will enable the trace elements as well as the nutrients to move around in the water. As long as you make sure your nutrient levels, lighting, trace elements, and flow are in check, and you take your time adjusting them, your corals will eventually color up and you'll have the perfect tank you've always dreamed of. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like down below. If you have any questions about coral coloration or any of the specifics, make sure to leave a comment down below. And if you guys want to stay up to date with all of our latest videos, you can subscribe and get notified whenever we drop our next video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.